Okay, I'm also rubbing scent off on these wooden stakes because since vampires sparkle I don't like them anymore.
That's better. In a previous episode of T.R.U, the boys got a hot tip regarding a potential thylacine sound from a documentary from the late 1990s. As you know, they downloaded this sound, cleaned it up, and formulated an experiment to take out in the field to see if it could be used as an attractant for thylacine and predators. The results from this experiment showed that a feral cat had come in, so they set about looking for physical evidence for that and other predatory animals in the area. From there, Woz showed off his IT skills and used Camtasia to make a vid about how he downloaded and cleaned up that sound. And in this video, the boys are looking at potential den sites in the Temperate Rainforest area.
We've come to a new investigation site that's probably a couple of kilometres away from the more open area where we've been investigating lately and the sound experiment. So the idea is that there's some habitat in terms of open spaces close by, and there's a lot of rock overhangs in this rainforest type area, so it's possible for predators like thylacines to traverse this area, perhaps stay 1 or 2 nights looking for a place to get out of the elements in between moving from grassland or open space to open space.
Chris walked through here without even bending over.
We've just started to undertake a fairly significant trek away from our last investigation site. So we're heading towards a river, and we're trying to identify potential natural hide or den sites, and we've come across this overhang which might provide an animal with some shelter outside to keep them outside the elements. So you can see here that there's evidence of fires being lit in here in the past. This area was logged fairly extensively about 100 years ago, and we're quite close to a water race where water was taken from the nearby waterfalls and taken to a local mine. So it could be from fires back then, or it could even predate that and to Aboriginal sort of use in the time. But nonetheless, it's a good environment for animals to take at least sort of temporary shelter in.
It's nice and dry here though. Everything else around here is sopping wet, but this is fairly dry, so yeah, I could see an animal would take shelter here if things got really rough. I can't see any evidence of it, so we'll press on, see if we can find some more overhangs or caves, possible denning sites.
So we've got quite a dry area under here, and you can see that there's some wombat scat down in there, so quite a good area for an animal, particularly if it was just passing through this area, because not a lot of grazing opportunities for a herbivore to take shelter out of the elements. So we've got a potential den site here just to my right, and it's an area that's quite large and quite dry, so everything else around this area is very wet. In fact, there's a stream that's sort of feeding the back of this area, but this would keep even a large carnivore like a thylacine pretty dry in inclement weather, so a good potential site. It doesn't look like there's a lot of recent use in here, although some things have been sort of scratched out, but there's no obvious signs of scat, except for maybe way at the back, and we might need a hobbit to actually get in there to have a good look.
So we can't find much evidence that it's been occupied recently. Comparable species like devil and quoll tend to drag a lot of nesting material into a hollow, so they get the insulation not only of the structure but the nesting material that they drag in. What I have seen though is a whole bunch of very large webs for the largest spider species in Tasmania. These are Hickmania troglodyte webs, and this is an amazing spider. It's one of the most primitive spiders in the country, as well as being the biggest, and it is often referred to as the Tasmanian cave spider. Just check out this primitive parachute style web.
So we're just investigating another potential hide or den site. This particular one quite close to a waterfall. It looks as if it might be a potential hide in a pinch, in a storm. Some sort of water table type action happening in the back of it. So the habitat around here isn't really that suitable to the thylacine. We've seen the occasional wombat scat, the occasional devil scat, but maybe they're just moving through this area, although the whole area is probably what people might think is stereotypical thylacine area. Close wooded areas, lots of potential cover and places to hide in, but no prey species tends to lead to no carnivores. I've got some unidentified scat here. Probably need an expert like yourself or Bill to get a closer look at it. It's in quite an unusual sort of place in terms of it's right underneath a waterfall. There's a potential den site to our immediate rear that looks quite dry, but there isn't a lot of normal sort of habitat for an omnivore, at least, to be living on.
Yeah. Wallabies. They probably shelter under here, I imagine. Crazy. Don't wallabies know anything about occupational health and safety? We're sort of on the side of a waterfall here, and we have a print here, and we have some scats. The scats look like wallaby. I'm not quite sure of this. This could be wallaby too. It's just pretty amazing that these guys are hopping around when down there is a sheer drop to their death. Game buggers.
Just having a look at some of this grass here, you can see that it looks as if it's been laid on. It's quite dry and it's flattened out in comparison to the grass around it. So we've found some wallaby scat in this particular area, so one could imagine that a wallaby's coming here looking for the grass to graze on and laid and particularly bedded down here. You can see just on this edge of the scats here that it's starting to go white, which would kind of suggest that it's probably been here for at least a week or two. So and it'll go completely white before it decomposes altogether.
An overhang like this, being so dark, is a pretty low energy environment, so anything that's edible would tend to get broken down fairly quickly. These scats we're looking at, they're white with a fungus. You've got the detritivores moving in, exploiting the energy that's come in with a herbivore. It's sort of classic ecology.
Okay, we're sort of looking through the rainforest for denning sites. We've actually found a potential denning site under the waterfall, but because of occupational health and safety, people can't go under there. So what we're going to do is get a hobbit to go over there, because, you know, Middle Earth just doesn't have the same occupational health and safety rules as we do. So it's over to Chris.
Well, this is an absolute postcard. It's not really what we at T.R.U. envisage as thylacine habitat. It's not really a productive area. Tropical rainforest gets lots of biodiversity, so it can support lots of different species. This area, it's very wet, it's very dark. At ground level, at best you get moss and lichen, so there's really not much for a grazing animal to eat. And so what are you going to support your predatory animals on? These overhangs They should certainly show signs of human occupation. They might be used by something like a thylacine in a pinch, but it's not quite what I envisage as a permanent den site for something like thylacine. It's a perfect area for them to traverse and pass through, particularly if you prescribe to the theory that thylacines were nomadic, summering up in the high country plains, wintering in the sort of flatter, more low-lying coastal areas. This would be a perfect pathway between those sorts of habitats. So undoubtedly thylacines have been here historically, but maybe not living here permanently. This is more what I had in mind for Thylacine Den. You've got an overhang, single entrance, it's dry, and it disappears down. It's much more confined than what sort of we were looking at before. Turn on the GoPro, here's my Hobbit halfling style body, and try and get down in there. The torch, William. Gonna go against T.R.U policy. Take off my ridgeline jacket. Not real keen to get stuck in here.
It's my sonic screwdriver.
Sonic screwdriver.
So what do we use?
Wombat scat. Actually goes back a reasonable way, but probably doesn't open up quite large enough to support a thylacine, but certainly a devil. Again, there's no nesting material that's been dragged in here, so it probably hasn't been used recently, but certainly in the past.
Okay, so we've just continued to walk and trek back towards our base camp away from the falls, and as we're starting to move into the more sort of alpine type of vegetation and conditions here, there's a large tree that's sort of been felled, you know, maybe up to 100 years ago, and there's another potential sort of den site here, probably more suited for a devil sort of sized creature, but again, out of the elements, creature can burrow in there and get a degree of protection.
Now what I'm thinking here is we're now in an alpine area, and the devil wouldn't get under just a log like this when there's snow, it's cold, but it would at summertime. But at winter time they're going to look for a place which is deeper down with a lot more insulation, and thylacine, either they've migrated to a warmer spot or they've found a nice deep cave somewhere that can really keep warm. So we'd be looking for a place deeper in the ground if we're going to see a thylacine today or at this time of year, but certainly a thylacine could lay under there at summertime.
Good point, Bill.
Full of them.
Full of it. This is absolute highway through this area. There's a major game trail through there, major game trail through here, absolute highway. Can just envisage wombat running down through here at 100 mile an hour, devil or thylacine in hot pursuit after it.
This old log here, it looks like a wombat's dug through and gone all the way to the other side, so it's probably not going to use it for a burrow, but it may use it for an escape burrow where it's being chased by something, gets in there, can knock its backside around, scare the predator off, and then also escape out the other end.
So we've got a 12 gauge shotgun cartridge here, so that we know that there are hunters that are in this area at times, but quite a clear case that there are hunters in the area, a little bit rusted over in the brass section to the rear, so it's probably at least a year or two old, but goes to show that there's more than just animals in the forest here.